Okay, what's up, guys? It's Thomas Abram. We're back on with Abraham's Tablet. Today I have Forrest Flesh. He's the man. He's a closer for us right now. He's made a lot of money going into 24, selling solar, but also MicroStrategy, other investments, real estate. So this is kind of like a solar, crypto, real estate, a little bit of everything. A little bit. We're going to be able to talk a little bit about his 12 years of history selling solar and what happened with Vivint and being a top rep and getting fired and moving over to Solnova and what's the real stories going on behind these things. And now Solnova's moved over to Solrite and we're pivoting to loans. So it's a whole discussion. It's a lot to get behind, and it's kind of a niche audience. But if you're a young entrepreneur and you want to be a multimillionaire by the time you're 35, maybe we'll get some golden nuggets here
Yeah, we'll see.
and see what we can pull out of it.
This is PG. I think Mark said it's PG-13, so I'm limited to one F word. As long as I only say one, it's not wrong, right? Is that what the rule is?
In Ukraine, they don't have the rules like this.
Right on, man.
Well, give us a little bit of a history. Let's start with solar. Who'd you start with? How long you been doing this? What's your
Yeah.
experience been? Should people still be? I just got off the phone with my buddy that sold out here. He actually originally brought me out to Fresno, and he left. He actually just left Lumio, and he left Lumio 3 weeks before they went bankrupt. So, and
Okay.
he just told me that he swore to never go back to solar. So it's kind of funny. He's out selling fiber is a new thing in some state. So for people that are kind of in the door-to-door game and they're thinking the solar game's dead and it's just different and they're moving on to other stuff, like why are you still in solar and where has it been and where do you see it going?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's been a really good vehicle for me. I think, when I was in college, just figuring out life, I grew up on a farm and was like, didn't know what the heck I wanted to do.
This is
And
Wyoming.
Montana, yeah.
Montana.
This guy tapped me on the shoulder and was like, "Hey, how'd you like to make 10 grand this summer?" And I was just like, I think I had like 4 grand in my savings account. So I didn't know I was going to pay for school. I was like, sure, let's do it. And
This is like the 90s, right?
no, dude, this is probably 2007, I think. I've sold mortgage checking accounts door to door in Utah, which is kind of the failed product.
Mortgage checking accounts?
Yeah, it's super hard to explain. It's like a HELOC. So I went door to door and explained to people that in Australia they pay off their mortgages faster if if they basically use their HELOC as like a checking account, and their paychecks go in there and then they accelerate the payoff of their home, and it could be like 7 years, and we had software to help people like mathematically do that, but really hard. It was like $3,500 on the door. I was like one of two guys that could even sell a couple of them, and I feel bad because I was just a punk kid. I didn't know it wasn't really that good of a product, but
It sounds like a complicated product.
yeah. Well, one day I came home from I was staying in company housing. This is in Riverton in Utah, and I came home and the apartment was furnished by the company we were working for. It's called Sydney Financial Group, and I came home and all the furniture was gone. So I was like,
What?
"Oh shoot!" So
Did they go out of business or?
they did, yeah. So
This is 2008.
I think it was 2000. I really think it was like 2006 or 2007, to be honest.
So this is just before the housing crisis. It was kind of still pumping.
Yeah. So
Where exactly in Riverton?
I remember it was so funny, man. I was knocking on people's doors, and every once in a while I'd run into somebody with like an interest rate of like 9%, and I'd be like, "Dang, that's really good. How'd you get that?" And a lot of people were at like 11 or 12%.
Really?
That was like normal back then.
So
So
the houses
yeah.
were just cheaper, so it penciled out.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, that wasn't a concern I had at the time. I was just trying to pay for school, so I wasn't really educated. I hadn't done the accounting program, but by that point, and I was just trying to make some money. But I mean, it's funny because when that happened, I got out of it. I went and got a job at GNC, and I swore off door to door. It's like I'm never going to do that ever again. And then my buddies that were roommates that were like trying to figure out what they were going to do, they started selling Dish Network, and they're like, come try this for an afternoon. And I think I was making like 540 an hour at GNC, and they said there'd be bonuses, and went out and made like $400 in like 2 hours doing Dish Network, talking to people about like TV and stuff. And so I got sucked back into it. And, but, you
Five
know,
bucks an hour.
yeah, that's what you
Now I
call,
can't get people to work for 20.
that's what you call desperation, man. I was like, I had no other options, but
Well, the dollar went further.
it's true. I went to so I did alarms for 4 summers. I think if somebody was to say, "Why should I do solar?" So like at least I haven't sold in a ton of markets, but what I really like about solar versus like alarms is that when you were doing alarms, you really had to be very pushy. You had to be witty, clever, quick on your feet. And solar is kind of like the buying pressure is really low because you're not having to do anything on the spot. And it's more consultative. So you get in and you have a lot of weapons that are on your side, whereas like alarms is like kind of like an emotional sell. It's very transactional. There's very few referrals. And so if you're somebody who really, doesn't like the intensity of pushing a product on somebody, but you want to be able to, you know, have that sales experience, solar is so unique. You're selling a product that doesn't cost anything, and your potential buyers is huge because I've always been interested in real estate. There's been a part of me in the back of my mind. It's like maybe I'll sell real estate one day. And and I've just observed over the years that like real estate is really hard, and you got to find somebody that you either got to find somebody who's in the situation to buy or sell, and um, with solar you just need to find somebody with a power bill. So your potential pool of buyers is really, really healthy.
But the commission's a lot, pretty similar to real estate, right?
Yeah, well, that and then the transaction volume is much. It's quicker turnaround. You can't do a real estate deal in a week. You can do a solar deal in a week, and you really can't. You can operate on referrals in real estate, but it's not as powerful as solar. So you can really multiply your efforts. So it's a better vehicle, and that was the thing. Like I really, when I got into solar, was really disappointed in where my life was going. I had a master's degree in accounting and like was trying to figure out like, what. I just wanted something that obviously paid the bills, but I also wanted validation, something that made me feel like important, like I'd made something out of my life, and I just didn't find it. And I had this like, couple, three things in between working in public accounting that I kind of like got introduced to. I tried each one for like a day. I actually drove my Alero Oldsmobile. It was like falling apart from Utah to Miami. Sold alarms there because that was all I knew. Just had connections to that, and it was kind of the end of the summer, and guys were getting done. So like I was just looking, and this buddy, I called Jason Brown, who's the VP of sales at Vivid. I was like, dude, I'm just not going to be doing this long term. It's not going to be what I'm doing. And he's like, hold on 1 second, man. Hold on. There's this solar thing going on in California. Do you want to he gave me some options of who I could go work with. And I knew Regan George and I knew Jeff Strong. And for whatever reason, it just made sense to go to Jeff's office, which was in Fresno. So I packed up my bags and drove. And I was so broke as a kid. I literally was like, I drove from Miami all the way to LA without one. I didn't sleep because I didn't want to pay for a hotel because I was like broke, So, so I get out there and, I just listened to the universe. I started selling solar, and it was a really hard transition for me because back, Vivint had this policy that you had to have an HIS license, and I applied. It took forever, and it just never came. I eventually got to a point I was going to talk to Chance Ard, he was the VP of sales at Vivint Solar. I was like, dude, I can't do this. Like, I've been waiting for like 4 months. So I was going to get in my car and go to Boston because I was so desperate to work, and they just gave me a pass to like just start selling in Madera, which is at the time was a slower permitting area. And it was funny. I just had my work anniversary yesterday. I remember the date they let me do it. It was November 13th of 2013, and I was like, so you know, you go through the holiday season, right? So it's like a 6 week permitting. So I sold all these people, and I go home for Christmas, and my family's like, hey, how's it going out there? And I was like, I think it's going good. I haven't been paid any money yet, but I've got like deals in the pipeline. And um, I didn't really realize that I was doing really well because I had some guys that were critics that had been doing it for a minute that they were kind of saying I was putting up fake numbers, and I didn't know any different. I just started working, and I was really desperate to have something work, so I was going really hard. And when Q1 hit, I instantly became the top sales guy on the team and ended up finishing in the nation number 6 in 2014. I had 169 installs, and the pay. It was funny because I didn't make that much money for that volume. I made like 245K, but I was coming from a place where I was making 50K
So you're getting
before
like
that.
$2,000 a deal.
I was getting like, I think the math is more, I think it's not even that good, dude. I think it was worse than that. But yeah, I mean, it was a different time. They were, I think your base pay was like 100 and gosh, I think it was like $130 a kilowatt. And then you got bonuses for like levels that you were hitting and stuff. But yeah, it was life changing. I mean, it kind of like allowed me to recalibrate, and I didn't really consider myself a salesperson. And that's what I love about, I think that there's a niche in solar because it's just for me, it just makes sense. You be a person with people, you be someone they can trust, and then you just be really good at explaining it. And I can't tell you how many times I've met with people and I'm like, they're just like, hey, you're the first guy that could like explain this in a way we could understand it. And I'm just like, I kind of doubt it. It's not like we're not explaining rocket science, but it's like, but I'm like really clear with people, and I actually don't. It's a different style. Like I like it more because when I was doing alarms, it was kind of like the pause right in sales is like it was your enemy, so you didn't want to give them a moment to respond because if you did, they're probably going to turn off what you're doing. And in solar, I just felt like, man, actually, I could just go really slow. In fact, I could be just like on this podcast, I could be like really boring. And people would still like, they actually appreciated that. They're like, this guy's not trying to pull the wool over my eyes. I almost kind of felt like sometimes I'd over explain stuff so much that people just get really comfortable and they'd just be like, dude, I got it, man. Like, what's the next step? And, it's a nice thing if if you have, a desire to do sales, but you don't want to you don't want to be that guy that the stereotype salesperson pushing something that somebody doesn't want. That's what's nice about solar. It's something, people want to save money. They want to believe you can save them money. They just want to do it with somebody they trust.
So you got your first taste in like 2007, and I was gonna ask like, where in Riverton were you selling? What was the product?
Mortgage checking accounts. Here's the thing, man. It was being built. So like I remember I don't really know Riverton too well. I mean, I would. This is like my
Remember
first.
126th down by the river bottom?
No, it sounds familiar, but I can't remember. Dude. I just remember that they were developing everything, and it's completely changed since then.
I was just gonna say because I live right on the river bottoms there. Like I'm
Yeah,
basically in Riverton,
yeah.
and you're probably driving by me. I was 10 years old,
There,
walking to the bus
there,
stop.
there's a Chili's there that made me so depressed. It's like off Bangor Highway, but I'll never forget when the mortgage checking account thing didn't work out. I went and I put on like my nicest, suit that I had, which was probably not very nice. I was a poor college kid, but like went in and I interviewed at Chili's and they had me take this personality test, and there was like two emo kids sitting next to me, totally covered in tattoos and colored hair, and I was like so serious, like I will do right by you, Chili's. Like you just give me a job, and like I took this personality test that they literally, I don't know what they were thinking. It was a bubble sheet. It took 45 minutes to fill it out. And
That's crazy.
I know, right? Like, so I was there for almost an hour filling that bubble sheet out. It was the most insane thing. And I'm sure they've like thrown that out, since then. But the guy who took that bubble sheet, he went in the back room and he came out 30 seconds later and said, "You're not what we're looking for." And I wanted to be like, "Dude, no, hold on a second here." But it was like, he just kind of dismissed me. And it just blew me away at that point in my life, because I was like, I just failed at this mortgage checking account thing. I was running out of money, and like, I can't get a job at Chili's. I mean, who am I? It was like was Zoolander, Ben Stiller. He's like, who am I? That's how I felt.
That's a crazy story.
I was looking at, what's it called, like Red Hanger. I was considering a job at Red Hanger. I was, a big gym buff, so like GNC made sense during that time, so I
Were you
did
going to
it.
school? Was that where you're there?
Well, yeah, I was at BYU. That was in between semesters though, so I went to Riverton, because I was gonna go sell for a company. I think it were called First Line Alarms, and that was going to be the thing. And I had a buddy from my mission that ran into me, and he's like, "Dude, you want to sell something that will set you up?" And I was interested in finance, and so I got sucked into the mortgage checking account product because I wanted to sell something that'd be like relevant to my future, and it just ended up being a bad choice. So a lot of disappointment and, I don't know, frustration, I guess. But I mean,
So you went,
yeah.
you got a job at GNC. Was it over there in Draper or over there in that same area?
No, it was that. I had to drive from Riverton all the way to the mall that's off of I-15. I don't know.
Almost like Murray,
It's like halfway.
Sandy.
Yeah, it's like halfway between, I don't know Salt Lake very well, but halfway between Salt. It's on the east side of the freeway. And it was funny because the guy that brought me into GNC, I was a way better salesman than him, but he was killing it. And at least, to in our world at that time, he was making good money. But he was in the Provo Mall. The Provo Mall had like really great, traffic for young kids buying supplements. And this GNC was located like, in an obscure part of the mall. And like, they're like, "Hey, if you sell like a lot of muscle tech products, you can make some commission." But I remember I only did it for like 2.5 weeks, because I got in there, and I remember like the first day I was there, and they're like, "You can't sit down," which that was like such a like just not unpleasant rule, like there's nobody in the store. You're not allowed to sit down for some reason. I don't really get that, but nobody came in the store for like the first 5 hours. And it's like, well, man, if you don't have any traffic in your store, you can't make commissions.
You have to
So
stand there for 5 hours.
just stand there for 5 hours doing nothing. And she would be like,
You couldn't pay me $5 an hour to stand there for an
it,
hour.
it was like a combination of demeaning and demoralizing, which is why I was like, and I think because of the hours they were giving me, and it was $5 an hour, I think my checks were like $200, probably like $200 to $300 a week, so it wasn't like I was really making any progress. But which is why, I tried on a Saturday at Dish Network, and I was like, geez, in 2 hours I made what I made at GNC the whole freaking week. So I guess I'm doing this again.
So mortgage company goes out of business. Chili's won't take you. GNC is making you stand all day, and no one's coming in the store. You sell Dish. You're like, I guess I got to do sales. It's the only way that it kind of pencils out.
Yeah.
Who brought you to Vivint Security, or how did that happen?
Uh, actually, it's funny because, Scott. So Scott, I met him. The way I met Scott is actually through this mortgage checking thing. So I go out to sell this product, and I go to a singles ward, and there's this kid that's just really social that gravitates towards me, and I have no reason. I just don't understand why. Like, he would invite me to his things and always be like, "Forrest, what's up, man?" And I just was like doing my own thing. But I guess he kind of sold me, because I was like, "Oh, guy really wants to hang out with me. I'll just like entertain it." But he went the next summer, and he did platinum security, and he made like 45K. And I did the accounting program at BYU that summer, and I just did summer school, and it was like dire. I mean, thank heavens, like BYU is really cheap, but like I was straight up out of money. And so he was trying to recruit me to platinum, and long story short, they had a bonus, and I don't know why, but in my head I was like, guys, I'm gonna go work for you. Just give me the $5,000. I need it. And they wouldn't unless I sold preseason. And so I walked into Todd Peterson's office at Apex, Vivint, Apex before Vivint, right? And I'm a nobody. He doesn't know me from anyone. I just said to him, look, man, I'm
Wait,
over
so
it.
Todd Peterson's running a security company called Apex in
That,
Provo,
yeah, that's
and you
what
can just walk into his office.
it was crazy. I walked into his office and he was like discussing I was like so impressed. He was like talking about like some $500,000 deal, which to me at the time was like, it was like he was talking about going grocery shopping. And I was so starry eyed when I saw him, but like it was just really funny because I don't think we really spoke much. I just told him like, hey, I'll be here instead of over there if you just want to give me $5,000 today. And he looked at me like didn't know me at all. Looks at me for like a few seconds, and he says, uh, he's like, platinum. I hate platinum. Done. And he's like, go find an office. And I walked out, and at the time, there's a mission buddy that I knew that was talking to Regan George, and he was outside the office doors talking shop, and basically they were going to Texas, and I was dating my wife who was from Texas at the time. So it just made sense. I literally, it was like funny. It was like everything just kind of fell in line. And I went out there, and it was like, it's funny how life works, because I got there, everything's messy, right? So I was there for like 6 days that didn't have a sale. And I said to Regan, dude, if I don't get a deal this Saturday, I'm not going to do a summer doing this. I'm wasting my time. And he was putting me in some pretty ghetto stuff, and we switched areas, went to this city called Colleen. And I went from doing no deals the first week. I got one deal on Saturday. It was a military guy, but he opted out of his contract. So like I thought I was making money, but I didn't. And yeah, I still remember this. I did 10 sales the second week. So I went from one deal the first week. We switched areas, and I did 10. I did 10 the next week, and then I did 10 again, and then 14 the next week, and then 10 the following week. And I was one of the top reps in the region. And I was like, I can't remember where I ranked in the rookies, but they used to have like a rookie ranking, and I was really high up there. So long story short, I stuck it out, made great money, and it
Did you do that
changed
for
my life.
3 summers?
Yeah, I did 3 summers, and then I did an internship at Deloitte and Touche for accounting, and so my fourth summer I just did a month, but it was, that was funny. I should have done the whole summer, because I did 50 that month down in the Phoenix
Or were they
market.
paying like $300?
I can't remember what. It was more like 300 to 600 depending on how you sold it. Yeah,
So that could have been 25 grand.
I can't remember.
But you're making like decent money at security, but
Yeah.
you weren't like the best.
Yeah, I wasn't the best. The thing is, no, I wasn't, but I didn't take it serious, to be honest. It was like, hey, I'm going to do this job. I didn't care about it. And I did it well enough that I graduated with a master's degree with college paid for. And Kim and I, right after graduating, we put $60K down on a house. And that's not normal,
That's
right?
awesome.
So like it wasn't like I was set, but it was like I did well enough that I set up some good opportunity for myself.
And you weren't working during the school year.
No,
So just working the summer, like
just summer.
you paid for all your school, survived, and bought a house coming right out of college. But what was different about solar that made it like how much more money did you make, and why do you think you were so much more successful, or is it not that much more money?
Well, the funny thing is, in the beginning, it wasn't, but it was more pleasant because, you look at how much money I made annually. It was like not super impressive to compare to what I could make in a summer in alarms. But, it's funny because I heard a podcast. This guy said, my desperation was my inspiration. And I don't, everyone's got their own path in life. But for me, I just felt kind of like I was falling into despair almost. Like I was 27 or 28. I can't remember, whatever I was in November of 2013. But I just wanted something to work, and I knew it wasn't door-to-door sales, but I had to make some money. And it was worse to me because I bought a house in Woods Cross, Utah, and that mortgage I couldn't afford. So like I'd put a great big. I remember the accountants that
What
the
was your
firm I
mortgage?
was at. It was probably like I don't remember. I mean, it was. I'm sure it was nothing, dude. I bought the house for like 270, and I put 60K down. I can't remember my interest rate or anything back then, though. You know, I mean, I was a little kid. So
I can't even imagine. That wouldn't buy
yeah,
you a trap house
yeah. No, that
inflation.
same house I looked on Zillow. It's like 800,000 right now. So it's crazy. I should have kept it, but no. So Kim was living out in Utah. I was in Cali. I was trying to figure out life, and that was a big part of my like depression was that I was waiting to work, and I was waiting to sell solar. Every day they were like, "Hey, just wait 2 more days. You'll be able to sell solar." That turned into 3 months, and they were trying to get alarm guys out there that could install deals for me so I could at least sell some alarms because at that point Vivint and Vivint Solar were kind of like, friendly towards each other, but it just didn't work out. So I was sitting around watching like I don't even remember Lost, Netflix, and just doing nothing all day, just feeling like a total loser. And when they finally let me start working, it was like this obsessive, like I just was so desperate to have something work. And so, I mean, I got 3 years into solar, and it was kind of funny because I still didn't view door to door as like, a respectable way to live, but I was making respectable money. And and I didn't have any better options. So I just kept doing it. And, it turns out that was like a really, good. You go through a lot of emotions in door to door. I went through the same thing. Some of it's like, you have people that don't give you respect. It's not. I was talking to a girl that we're hiring right now about this. Like, it's not really cool if someone asks you like from your hometown, like, "Hey, what do you do for work?" Like, "Oh, I knock doors and I sell stuff." Like, that's not necessarily like That's not something that looks real sexy, but um, it's it's the money aspect of it. And you look at people too that you hire for this industry. I heard Casey Boss say this. He said, "Hey, everybody can see the fruits, but nobody sees the roots." And I was thinking about that, and I was like, the other thing you could say there is everybody wants to taste the fruit, but they don't want to grow the roots. And that's the interesting thing hiring people is like this job to me, I did, my dad was a laborer and he did really unpleasant work. And I got to experience that when I was a kid. So, like, I knew what I didn't want to do. I didn't want to do construction. I didn't want to do farm work. And I knew what it was like to do hard manual labor in cold weather in Montana and hot weather in Montana, and I just wanted anything but that. And but looking at people, it's funny. I have to say, so maybe not PC enough for a podcast, but I think the generation that the upcoming generation, they are cut they're cut from a different cloth because I've met with so many guys that saw the money I was making. They're like, dude, if you can make that, like, I'm going to make 500K. I'm like, so what do you want your goal to be? Like, let's do 500K. I'm like, well, what's the most you ever made? Like 30K. I'm like, dude, do we have to go from 30 to 500? Like, can't we just kind of have a more realistic goal? But then those dudes, that's the fruit, right? They want that income, and but they don't want what comes with that income. And I guess that's what's different for me is that my life had just kind of perfectly been set up to like when I got, when opportunity arrived, I didn't care what it looked like, so to speak. I'd shovel poop if it was going to pay well, and just so happened that shovel and poop just was solar, and it was great.
Well, they make the mistake. It's like they think that the reason they're broke is they're always just looking for that get rich quick scheme. Like the reason I'm broke is, and it happens when you have that external locus of control and you tell yourself stories like, I had to do this because this happened to me. So the cards just never play in my favor. I always get unlucky. It's that you're placing your locus of control outside of yourself, And so then it's like, if I had the right opportunity, they think, if I had the right job, if I had the right anything, then I would just have the money. But it really is more in lines with, who was it? Was it Tesla that said think in terms of frequency? It's more in line with
I don't know.
frequency, and I think it might have been Einstein and Tesla, but one of them for sure said, like, think, if you want to understand the universe, think in terms of frequency and energy.
Mm,
And it's like, if your energy was at $30,000 a year, you got to really drastically change who you are. And it's more of an internal thing for me. I really believe that it's like your outer world is a reflection of your inner world. And so people get out there, and I guess your inner world finally was able to actualize, because it's opportunity is where preparation meets the opportunity, and that's how you can create what you're looking for. But it's all about the preparation that you had prior to that.
yeah,
What do you
it's
think it
true.
is? Because something you mentioned twice is like, first week, man, if I don't get a security deal, this isn't going to work. In solar for 3 months without any deals, and you're feeling like that desperation. And I would say 80% of people, they hit that wall in sales and then they just give up. 80% of the people we've hired, 20, probably between me and Scott, 30 people, 40 people have said they'd come in and they gave it a good week, and they're like, it just didn't click for me. What is it that like helped you burn the boats, or what's that catalyst that sets apart people that just want it and the people that are like willing to do whatever it takes to get it?
Yeah. I mean, that's a loaded question, man. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. But, I think a big thing that sales guys have to do that's interesting is you can't give too much credit to your feelings and your emotions. So, like, if you experience some unpleasantness doing work, uh, you know, let's just be honest. Like a lot of things that are worthwhile in life, you have to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. Like that's just going to come with it. And I think that I have hired. There's a few guys that stick out in my mind. That this is actually out in Texas, but there's been plenty in California too. That I was really excited about them. I could see they had high talent. Some of them are college athletes, and they come in and they just don't know how to do it. And there's two things, at least for me, that I felt like I was gifted. It was that I could just turn my brain off in between doors and ignore my feelings. So it's like I was a robot, and I was like, save all my energy, my emotional energy, for the next person. And a lot of people are like going through the feelings of, like, whether it's boredom or there's a lack of patience. There's a lot of things you feel, the heat, bugs, whatever it is, when you're knocking doors. And a person that has, like, needs to be comfortable, unfortunately, like, you're not going to make that money in this job if you can't be like, I mean, if you sold every person, every other second of the day, you'd be set for life within like 5 months of work. And that's just not how it's just not how it works. So, like, that's, there's a whole bunch of things that go into it. I also think, though, I have seen a handful of people that put in the hours, and I don't know how to explain this, but like I'll get on a door with them, and I'll be like, dude, you showed up, but you didn't show up mentally. Like, the firmness of mind that your homeowners need. I can't tell you how many people over the years that have bought solar from me, and they look at me and they're like, well, like, this is like, I'll say something about their home that wasn't ideal, and they'll look at me and they'll be like, well, this is still good to do, right? And they're like asking me, and I know that my job is to give them that, like, reassurance, like, yeah, because, and if I don't, like, how could they, if as the sales guy, if I don't give them the reassurance to, like, you know, to like do it, like, how can they feel confident? But I sympathize with people. I mean, this last 4 years of solar, I've really focused more on management. And when I was at Vivint Solar, it was like, just go sell, go lead. And that was simple. It was like, just go be the best guy on the team. And that was easy to do. It really was like, I didn't have to give as much of myself as I did. It was like, hey, just free up your schedule for knocking doors and, do those things. But, like, managing people has been so eye-opening for me to understand how complicated people are. And, when you say, like, what's the most important thing? It's like, gosh, there's so many things. Like, One is like discerning truth. Like to me, that's really important. And then being able to discern, uh, you know, figuring out once you have a grasp on truth, it's how should I feel about that truth, and how fit are you emotionally? Like we have a lot of sales guys, they're a mess. They're a mess emotionally, and it's like if you're not well put together emotionally, you just can't do this job. It's just not possible. And I see that so much with so many guys that they just they're and there's so many voices. If you want somebody to agree with you, all you got to do is go to the internet, and there's going to be somebody that tells you the perspective that you want to hear. And so you have to, yeah, I think people have to be very careful what voices they listen to.
Yeah, I mean that's so. What I'm hearing is if you want to like break out of that catalyst and go from someone that's making $30,000 to a higher amount, you first have to kind of sit down and ascertain where truth is and like where you want to go. And then you have to have a plan that you execute with faith and conviction. So, like hey, for example, Forrest has done this. I'm going to put my faith in him. I'm going to ignore my day to day emotional feelings and I'm going to go execute this plan from my mentor who's done it before. And it's this like leap of faith followed by action. Maybe that's a simultaneous thing where it kind of catalysts you through the next barrier until you can partake of the fruit and gain a witness for yourself that those roots are legitimate.
It's a hard part. So I've said this to my wife several times. Like, look, I know you've never felt this, but like, try to imagine like you wake up in the morning and you're like, I don't know where my deal's coming from, but I have to go figure that out. When you were referencing, in the beginning when I said like, hey, if I don't get a deal this week, it was, then I'm done. The belief there for me was that I wasn't a good fit for sales. That was my limiting belief. Now my focus is different. So like I would say, because I have enough experience now, I just pay attention to the market. So I'm like, hey, if other people are getting deals, I really don't need to know anything more than that. I'm like, if they can get deals, I can get deals. That's it. But in the beginning, it was like I was on, the I was so to speak, like judging myself. Like, hey, it's unclear whether I can actually, participate in this arena.
So there's a confidence part that's part of that faith. And I think building that confidence has to do with
It's experience. Yeah.
having that, I think it's Hermosi that says like you want to stack up evidence that you do what you say you're going to do. And that's why it's so demoralizing. And I almost don't even want to work with guys when they tell me they're going to do something and they don't want to do it and they don't do it. Like, hey, I'm going to stop playing this video game. Hey, I'm going to start going to the gym. 7 a.m. I'll be with you. I had a guy this last winter who stayed with me all winter, and every single day before we went to bed, he'd be like, I'll be with you at the gym tomorrow morning at 7. And every single day.
Are you talking to me? Are you talking about me?
No. You just won't let me live with you because you do weird stuff. But every single day he wouldn't show up. And it just like stacked up all this evidence against himself until he had no confidence and he just couldn't close anymore. Even though in the past he'd had a lot of success. Mm-hmm. And so confidence is this thing that's like a daily internal life. How are you managing your own expectations and your own commitments? And then that comes out in your confidence in yourself and therefore your faith to execute the plan, which kind of reminds me of crypto. Like you were asking me, hey, what's the move in this crypto cycle? And I'm like, well, every time, this is my third crypto moon cycle, and every time I go and like get into these micro caps and I go for these 100Xs, and every time like I'm always make more money when I sit down and I just execute a plan. It's like what needs to be done. I know the top 100 coins are all going up. I need to pick one or two, maybe top 10 coins, just go in and then just go and get as much cash as I can and keep buying those coins and then sell. You can kind of tell before the bear market is going to come. Although you always think it's like a new paradigm. Oh, this one's different. But when I sit down and kind of put my emotions aside and I trade like that, I'm really, really successful and I just execute my plan versus if I day to day like ride my FOMO and FUD, mm-hmm. I absolutely get trounced every single time. And that's how I lost $500,000 last cycle because I had
Yeah.
so much FOMO that this was going to be the 2x that was going to take me from I'm going to turn 500,000 into a million overnight and it's going to change my life. And that FOMO leads me to act on my state of emotion that's far from my logic and my intuition. When I follow my logic and intuition, like if I always did that, I'd have so much money right now. But it's when I
Yeah.
get into and let myself get distracted by the emotions I have day to day.
Yeah, you know, gosh, there's a lot of things that I don't deserve credit for in life, but there's one thing that I tell guys constantly, which is like you have to be loyal to what you see works. And you know, I look at that even as a kid innately for me. If something doesn't make sense to do it, I just don't. It's like I don't like knocking doors, but like I could see how it made sense to do it, and if it made sense, I'm just kind of a creature of. I think, I mean, I try to be loyal to logic. I don't know. Obviously, we're all hypocritical to a certain degree, but like I try to be loyal to logic. And you see that pattern in my life. Like when I was a kid in high school, um, it's so weird, but like I just had a bunch of classes that I just stopped going. And my mom was like, she would call in and tell him, hey, Forrest has a headache. And I had like 50% attendance in high school the last 2 years. I had good grades, but I wouldn't go to class if I felt like I was wasting my time. And they changed. There's a small school in Shelby, in Montana. Like we had a different thing, right? Like they hadn't set clear boundaries. And I tore my ACL. I mean, you look at, you know, sometimes you need those. You need people. I didn't know. I didn't have a lot of wisdom. I messed up. There's a lot of times in my life where I was like, geez, I might be going the wrong direction, but I tore my ACL, and this is like not even relevant, but it's an interesting, funny story for the podcast. I tore my ACL, and I was on the basketball team, and it was like I loved basketball at the time, which is funny, but like I should have been a wrestler, but I did basketball, and the we were riding home from a game that I was on the varsity bus, and I got a little peer pressure and from some guys that I should go up to our coach naked and tell him to turn down the heat on the bus, and I I don't know what I was thinking. I just did it. So I like went up to the front of the bus naked, and it's like, hey coach, you should turn down the temperature. It's pretty hot. And he turns around and looks at me and realizes what's going on. He's like, Flesh, what the F are you doing? And I was like, oh,
What team is this?
this is not going as well as I thought it would. Cause I thought it'd be cool, you know?
Is this
And
football?
this is basketball. Yeah.
Okay.
So like, anyways, it turned into this big fiasco in my life. I got 3 days out of school suspension where I was getting zeros on my papers. And I thought that one decision, I thought I'd like messed up my entire life, but I've never really been a guy that like really is, I need to pay, I guess, probably more attention sometimes to social norms, but like, I've just never really bought in. And it was part of my upbringing. Like I was raised mostly LDS. My dad's Catholic, but there wasn't a lot of kids in my high school that really even went to church. So I never drank. I never did a lot of things that normal kids do. And it kind of made me an outsider. And because of that, I think it just started this trend of, I'm just kind of independently going to evaluate what truth is and what fads I should pay attention to. What should I care about? And you look at crypto. I was a big crypto hater, and now I've got over, I've got like $1.5 million in it right now. And it's because it didn't make sense to me before. I've paid attention to it, and like it makes sense to my brain to be like, dude, you should pay attention to the universe. It's telling you there's opportunity here. So, I'm changing my mind.
What led you to change your mind about crypto
I just watching it over time, I guess.
as it went up?
Well, I mean, FOMO, right? No, I mean, it helps the bandwagon effect. I mean, you see right now too, BlackRock's dumping money into it. You see publicly traded companies that are now putting it as like their reserve currency on their books, and there's promising trends that make risk feel a little bit mitigated. There's still risk there, but it doesn't feel nearly as risky as it once did. So,
And then MicroStrategy is just a play on that.
yeah, it's just a convenience thing, dude. I feel safe in Coinbase, and but they have really high fees for trading and day
Is
trading.
MicroStrategy in Coinbase?
No, but that's why I trade it. I can trade it on any exchange. It's just a publicly traded stock, and it's been good. I mean, I've got just started in May. I've got huge gains on it, but I've got realized gains of about 250. And that's really not my goal, is to have realized gains, but I decided I'm going to do some real estate strategies here. I'm going to sell an 18-plex next year. I've got cost segregation, depreciation I need to use. And so my plan is to run about $400,000 to $600,000 of, ordinary gains, even though that normally would seem unintelligent to do, but I'm going to do that because I'm going to roll that into a different real estate project and start over with cost segregation.
When?
Like January, February. I've already listed it.
I feel like taking 600 grand out of crypto January, February is going to be something that gives you a lot of FOMO.
No. I'm not doing that. So I have a lot of cash. So I'm riding up the wave. I've got my bag that I'm holding, but what I like to do with the volatility is I like to jump in on dips and sell. So I've got over 1.1 million, for example, in MicroStrategy, and that bag I don't touch. I don't touch it at all. But because I've seen so many gains, I have a game I'm playing with myself. This is probably not like going to be interesting to anybody that's in the audience, but like I'm trying not to violate the wash sell rules. So what I do is when I see a huge dip, I just buy because I have excess cash, and then it goes up, a certain amount, and I just sell out. And but I always maintain the underlying bag. So I'm playing both angles.
But what I heard earlier is that you're going into real estate.
I am.
And you've already listed it.
Yep.
You've already put the cash in?
What do you mean?
Like there was a down payment to build it?
No. So I have.
Oh, you're listing the 18
I'm listing it for sale, and I'm going to roll that 1031 style into other projects that'll give me new depreciation amounts that I can offset against my gains in solar and.
Is that other real estate?
Yeah.
So you can sell that and keep some of the depreciation and roll it into the stuff in Park City?
Yeah, I don't know how much you know about real estate, dude, but I mean, basically, in short, if you sell an investment property within 180 days, if you buy something that has a bigger transaction amount than what you sold, and it can be multiple properties, then you don't have, the gain is not taxed. So when you buy something, like let's say like this property is $4.7 million. So like you can't depreciate land, but the building you can depreciate, and it gets offset against ordinary income. And so there's a certain amount of implied tax evasion that you can do there, and it's legal. The government wants you to provide housing, so they allow for that. Well, on the exit, when you sell, you'd have to recapture that depreciation you took and also pay on the gain. But if you do a 1031 transaction, you can roll that forward into another property, and that next property will now have a new set of depreciation that you can capture. And hypothetically, you can avoid paying taxes forever as long as you can buy something in time.
As long as you keep it in real estate.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you see, I saw on Twitter today that Trump is toying with the idea of 0% crypto gains tax.
Yeah.
What do you think that would do to the market?
It'd be good.
It's like a fever dream right now with the Department of Doge efficiency, Department of Government efficiency, and Tulsi Gabbard and everyone he's calling into the cabinet. It's just like, it's like a fever dream. It's like I've felt for so long like the government's overextending its reach. Like it's so, suffocating for capitalism and entrepreneurship and even just everyone we talk to. Literally, we go and we knock door to door, and people get out of touch. My rich friends from Utah, they're like, dude, the world's better than it's ever been. And I'm like, dude, I sit with homeowners every single day, and people are more broke than they've ever been. They're desperate. They cannot afford these bills. They cannot afford food. You're talking about adding a new gas tax in California, and I think that's kind of what happened. It just got to a point where we really need to regress, and I'm just so excited for the future with a government that supports crypto and it supports innovation. And Elon said, like, look, the payments on our debt is exceeding our GDP. So unless we cut government funding, like, we're done. And people were acting like one of my buddies posted like, "Oh, isn't it kind of scary that an oligarch, rich guy is now going to, you know, put pressure on the government to lower taxes to make himself more rich? You don't think that's a little bit extra power?" I'm like, well, doesn't it concern you that the government's been doing this with no oversight and no one holding them accountable for 30 years with far more power and far more spending than Elon Musk has?
Yeah.
So I try to temper my excitement, but it just seems too good to be true. Like everything that I would want to do, and as far as reducing spending and acknowledging the reality that we have far too much debt and we need a different plan. Someone, I think it was Peter Schiff, posted, "Hey, I have a solution for Social Security. Take the $2.3 trillion we have for Social Security and just go into Bitcoin. If you don't, we can't afford Social Security.
I would.
And if you do, we might."
That would shock me if Peter Schiff would say to go into Bitcoin, dude. He's pretty stubborn on Bitcoin, man.
It could have been like a pseudo account. I Someone said that on Twitter this morning.
Yeah.
But like we know that
Probably not Peter Schiff, dude.
I hear you.
He's stubborn. Yeah.
Social Security is a failed program, and that's what we're kind of bringing ice to. Is like the reality is these economics don't add up, and if you actually stop, defrauding money around and money laundering and paying everyone off, like AOC's on, she was a bartender before she got elected, and she's on like $180,000 salary, and now she's worth $23 million. I think if you're a senator or a congressman and your net worth doubles while you're after you've been elected, you should be put in jail.
Yeah. That's a prime example of why life's not fair. So that's definitely not fair for sure.
Well, it's like if you're being paid to represent the people in your community, and you're on a $180,000 salary, what have you done to make $20 million in the last 3 years?
Yeah.
Except for being bribed. Like, what could it be?
Oh, it's corruption for sure. When I hear that, man, I think, it's been like that for a long time. I mean, when I was selling alarms, I remember, and Dish Network, that was a long time ago now. And people would say they'd buy your stuff and then they'd be like, when's that first payment going to come out? And it was like $60 RMR they're paying a month, and you're like, why are you asking? And you stopped asking that once you understood how people worked. Like they wanted to know when it was coming out because they didn't have $60. And that's pretty sobering to think about that. Like the number of people I heard that from that would first of all buy something when it was in question. You're buying something from a door-to-door guy when it's in question that you can even, pay $60. It just shows, first of all, I think how the financial illiteracy that people have, but, when you have a good worldview, it's a real, for me, it's a real responsibility and duty that we have to try to be financially successful. And it's, despite the challenges that we have, like the next generation, yes, it's not as easy in some ways. Like owning real estate, for example, it's gotten real hard. It's really, in fact, I was talking to my wife about this last night. Like I'm a huge fan of multifamily, but I once had a goal to do 100 doors. I've got 34 and they're all privately owned. And it's, I think I get like revenues of like 65,000 or something a month, but that's not my profit. But like I told my brother, I was like, I want to do at least $100,000 a month. That just makes sense to me. And now I actually look at like, hey, what's working in the market? And, crypto right now seems like a really good spot. And you got to find niche things, syndications, things that they just speak to you and they have the return you're looking for. And that just takes, I think the opportunity is still there for consumers. They just have to save some freaking money. Don't spend it. And, keep your eyes open. And there opportunities, this is the greatest country on earth. Opportunities they will be there. But, you're absolutely right. A lot of people have failed. And I think it's not, unfortunately, like I remember Bill O'Reilly was talking about, he referenced a scripture in the New Testament. I don't know, it stuck out to me, but he's like, the poor will always be with you. And I think that's true. But there are a lot of people that are not financially prepared. And unfortunately, it's their fault.
I hear you. I'm not trying to take away people's personal responsibility, but there's absolutely a governing force here that is harvesting the middle to lower class for revenue. And that is being done through the mistake that my leftist friends make is they're thinking that this is rich businesses, hiking up their prices and squeezing people out. Well, they don't realize that is just in tandem with the government that's enabled it. So, for example, BlackRock owns all the food companies, and these food companies, and this used to be like really, tinfoil hat stuff, but now Kennedy's talking about it, and he's going to be in charge of the Food and Drug Administration.
Yeah.
So it's so exciting. But the foods and the dyes and the biphosphates,
they're buying Bitcoin now. I'm going to give them a pass.
Well, BlackRock's like, if you follow the money, and that's so funny because everyone knows it's the money, but they don't want to do the research to follow the money. They just watch CNN, or I don't know what they watch. But, they're putting this food in, and they know it does this. It's all over Europe that they don't even use these ingredients, whether it's glyphosate or Red 40 or whatever. They cause chronic illness, and then they also are invested in the medical industry that profits from chronic illness. And then we have this absolutely terrible medical system. Like, my wife and I went in for one day. We stayed one night, and they charged us $24,000 for a birth that was...
They probably wined and dined you, though, didn't they? You got the Jell-O?
What was the Jell-O for?
I don't know. You didn't get the hospital
Jell-O? Oh, like the food at the hospital, which is also sad. The food at the hospital is like all poisonous too. But it's part of this machine, is my point, where they're actually profiting from the demoralization and stuck. Like, it's like they literally, there's like a price tag on every person that goes through the American system, whether it's their mortgage, their car, their food, their medical expense. Like, the Fed can sit there and say, hey, every American's spending about $1 million with us. And they're betting on that, and that BlackRock's part of that, and they're squeezing out the middle class by buying up all the houses. So I totally agree that there's still it's internal locus of control. You have to prepare, and then an opportunity will come, and that's how you get out. And I like that story, like the story of hope. Like, let's not talk about why you're stuck. Let's talk about how to get you out. But, like, at the same time, if it's literally our government that we the people institute, like Kennedy's saying, we have some sort of responsibility to not poison our constituents.
So I think I'm gathering you voted for Trump.
I actually didn't vote.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, come on, man.
I hate to say it.
Oh, wow.
I hate to say
Avoiding your civic duty. I don't know how to feel about that.
We were ready. Hannah and I were going to go. It was like 8 p.m. I had a long, busy day at work, and I was like, look, the reality is my vote's not going to matter in California. And while I should go on principle, the reality is it's 8 p.m. I want to go home. I want to get to bed.
Yeah.
So forgive me. If I was in Utah, absolutely. It's just absolutely sickening that Utah's the only right-wing or Republican state that went more against Trump than they did the previous. And it's really, really sad to see that happen culturally. So in Utah, I totally would have done it. I think my voice would have mattered. In California, like, my vote was already canceled out by Victor, who isn't even live here, and is he even a citizen?
I'm sure Victor. Yeah, he is, dude. I'm sure he voted for Trump.
But he went in, didn't even have an ID, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
My other buddy from Australia sent me a post where his buddy from Australia went in and they let him vote. And it's like,
I wonder what would happen, because I voted in Texas. I wonder if I would have came in and voted here too, if that's against the rules, or if I could just do that.
You could have totally got away with it. People say
that's messed up.
Like, I know people are like, oh, there's no way that there's any issue with the election. It's like, I know people who personally cheated.
Yeah.
And they posted it on Facebook and said, hey, I'm from Australia and I voted. You guys are all stupid.
You're right. Yeah.
It's like, don't gaslight me into this, like, that's literally impossible. It's like, people have cheated since every grade school, high school, for the dawn of time.
Yeah.
And you don't think that if you had a really high, that we've already given $1 billion to a campaign. You don't think if you were motivated to $1 billion, you could figure out how to sneak some votes in there? for example, having the government work overtime, Harris approved overtime for them to ship in people they were shipping them in like all the way to the last day in the swing states that, how many of those illegal immigrants voted because they're not checking for ID? And then how crazy it is, the narrative that you wouldn't want to check for ID. And so, Trump talking about, hey, we're going to bring it back to the states and we're going to make sure everyone that votes has ID. Like that literally could have been the dividing point in our country. If you can vote forever, whether you're a citizen or not, or we're going to make sure you're a citizen if you vote. Like that could have been what decided the fate of our country.
Yeah.
Is whether or not we let people that are non-citizens to vote about our elections.
Yeah. It's a strange irony to care so much about Russian interference but not care about that type of fraud. It doesn't add up too well, for sure.
So back to Vivint. Why did they fire you, and where did you go?
Honestly, I was 1099, so it was more like our relationship was broken up. But I mean, it's like I don't really feel like it's an interesting story, to be honest, and I've kind of moved on from it. But I did 800 deals for Vivint Solar, and like the 300th deal, it was a home out in Chowchilla I was referred to, and I didn't even make any money off of it. But this homeowner wasn't on care or anything, just needed a hookup. But there's a lot of problems. I mean, in short, the mistake I made at Vivint is I was a franchise member, and I advertised that I was a director of sales on Indeed, and Vivint was getting was getting sued by a lot of people. And at the same time, there was a bunch of class action lawsuits. Well, somebody in New York, thought I was like an important person. And so they put me in the front of this like conglomerate of like 10 lawsuits against Vivint Solar. And I was on the front page with like Vivint or with Tyler Williams. And
It was like your Indeed photo?
yeah, it was my Indeed photo. Yeah. So they told me not to worry about it. There was a ton of things that could have been done to make this homeowner happy. And I'm sure the homeowner had absolutely no idea how they impacted my life, because I was on good terms with her. I'd never had a negative conversation for 2 years. They were like, please get my system turned on. And I remember calling Abigail Hansen, who was kind of like in charge of handling these situations. I said, hey, this is getting kind of bad, but I could just go give her $1,000 and I think it'll go away, but we need to turn that thing on. We need to turn that system on. And I don't know why they couldn't PTO it. There was actually a lot of uninteresting things that happened along the way. Like Vivint never inspected the roof. And then when we got out to do the install, I'd paid for trenching. And they were like, well, we can't install this. The roof's terrible. I'm like, dude, you guys told me you surveyed it several times. And it was because I sold it like early, sometime in 2015, and it sat for like 8 months because they didn't decide if they wanted to install it or not, because there was these things that were kind of floating around. And so if the OM would have just owned up to it, it was his fault. If he would have just owned up to it and not installed it, which is what happened, is the city of Chowchilla said the roof was too bad to install on. And so they just couldn't figure out how to get past that. And then eventually the homeowner, I did use a co-signer for it, which was the lady's daughter. And what they did is they basically in the paperwork said that the two things. They said that I was having them sign an English contract, and they were Spanish speakers, and the parents were Spanish speakers, but the kids, they had like 3 or 4 kids that were adults that were living in the home at the time. And I have a record of this that no one cares anymore, but like all of my communication was in English, but the lawsuit says like we don't speak English. So Vivint didn't care about that though. I remember when something was settled behind the scenes, and I was on the chopping block, and it was a great experience because it really caused me to ask, like, did I deserve this? And because I know I was one of their best reps that did the best business that's came through that market. And now that I've seen what the reps do over there, there's a lot of lack of integrity that's just in general kind of going on in the business. That's unfortunate, but
You're talking about Sunrun? No.
yeah, I don't want to say specifics, but I mean, because really, in truth, it's all over the place, right? But like the for me though, it's kind of funny because I look at it from a religious perspective. It was like one of those things that like once I was done, I'd given so much of my identity and emotion at that point. I was 6 years hard at Vivint Solar. It was the number three installer in their company history, and I don't think I got an ego from that, which is good because I think that that's unappealing. That people, once they get a little bit of money, right? It's kind of like the Doctrine and Covenants. So once you get a little bit of power, it goes to your head, so to speak, and then there's unrighteous dominion or whatever. That wasn't me, but I was kind of I did let them take over my life, and that was one thing my wife has accused me of for years. That once I saw that it worked, I just went really hard and I didn't have a good work-life balance. If Vivint said jump, I was like, how high? And I would have been prepared to do that for another 6 years. And I think it was great that interrupted kind of what was going on in my life. But it's funny the way you face challenges like that because it wasn't fair. And they actually to follow up that story, they actually came back a year later and was like, "Hey, we're sunrun now. Come back." And I didn't because it just didn't feel right. But I love there. I have some great friends there that I cherish the friendships that I made. But discerning like how to digest that type of experience. At the time, I remember I'm not quick to tears. In fact, it's an unusual thing to say. Like in life, like as a man, I'm more prone to cry out of joy than I am out of sorrow. That's kind of a funny thing. I think that probably a lot of people relate to that. But there was a moment when I did shed some tears for probably like 10 minutes. And I had Castle Keeler was there he was the co-manager for me and he came over to my house and it was kind of demoralizing because it was like Vivint chose this guy that wasn't as good as me. He didn't do as much, but he did stroke the right egos and played his cards really well.
Is that Castle?
Yeah, Castle. Yeah, and he's a good guy, but like he came over to the house and it was like him seeing me right at that moment when like facing that. And honestly, I mean, he called the first call I got from him wasn't like hey, I'm concerned. I'm so sorry for what happened. It was, dude, I think they're going to fire me too. Like, how do I switch these deals out of my name? And there was several guys like that. Like, there was a lot of stuff. Like, the industry now does a lot better job of protecting its reps. Like, this deal that we got in trouble over, there was no paper trail, there was no DocuSign, but there wasn't a paper contract. So it was one of those things where at that time you'd sign a deal on Sign My Pad, the app, and you just send it in by emails, which is like such an easy way to, you have to take it on faith from a corporate standpoint that the rep did just sign that. And though, if you DocuSign's a beautiful thing because that's a great protection that wasn't there at the time. But so that moment was kind of like a low point, I feel. And afterwards, again, it wasn't like what happened. I made great money. It was, but it was a hard pill because I think my LTIP I was told was going to be about $3 to $4 million, which happened just 10 to 11 months later. And I just spent a lot of time like trying to be honest with myself. Like, did I deserve that? And the thing is that my assessment that I think is fair is that of course I don't think it was. I had several people that were above me, and even when they were trying to hire me back, they're like, "We're sorry, like we were in a really hard spot, and there was context there you didn't know." But you don't. Here's what I was thinking though, coming out of that, like if from an LDS perspective, which I don't know if the audience here would be LDS, but we believe in a pre-existence, and I kind of was. I would tell. I came to a point where I was like, I don't know what the heck is my path, what God's plan is for me, and if this is part of it or not. Like, I don't get to know that. I'm not entitled to it. But who knows? Maybe somewhere in the, because I'd say like, I'm I'm a little bit too flippant with my words. Like, I'm like, hey, Castle, just a super overrated guy. I'm like, I don't know what that guy did in the pre-existence. Maybe he deserved a free ride, and maybe I didn't. I don't know what I did before this life. So, that's an entitled thing for me to, and I just kind of like learned to let go and move on. And my wife I don't have a lot of virtues, but she said that about me. She's like, I don't know how you can forgive and move on when people do things against you so quickly. And it's something I inherited from my dad, and it's just been part of my life that you have tragedy. What can you do? You move on and you don't dwell on it. But I'm not really, I think I would have made a ton of money if I stayed at Sunrun, but my lifestyle would have been horrible. I just don't even know that if that what happened wasn't for the best. So that's just the truth.
And then did Regan get fired too, or what ended up leading you to follow Regan over to Solnova?
It was just I was well known in the space and had lots of options, and he swooped in and was like, "Dude, let's go build out Texas." And
Did he leave Vivint before that, or he's already been left for a few
he
years?
did, yeah. He got passed over for a promotion. He took it personal, and then so he went out to do his own thing. Yeah.
And then did you get like a year break after that with Vivint, or did you go right over and work for Regan
Dude, I just kept doing what I was doing.
in the
It was
same
funny.
market?
No, I should have stayed. That was my biggest mistake. Is I went to Texas, and I still made good money in Texas, but I would have just destroyed it in Fresno with the transition from NEM2 to NEM3. So now I'm kind of in this place where it's funny. Like, so that's the thing. You look, if you're like, hey, should I do solar? Like, my life goal before I got in solar was make 100K, and now I'm like, I feel like my responsibility is to figure out a way to get to like a net worth of 15 to 20 million dollars, and that's because it's possible with the assets that I have and intelligent,
So solar took you from 100K
Yeah.
to, and it's gonna take you to 15 million.
Yeah, it's a fair comment. Yeah, yeah. I don't, and again, I just
Let's
think I
do
took
it.
it. I took advantage of a good thing. I think it's. I tell people all the time, hey, if you think I'm an unremarkable person, you're probably right. But I had a good vehicle. But you see that all the time, though. I mean, I've seen there is. I mean, you just brought up AOC. You look at Hunter Biden. Money is not an indicator always of quality of person. In fact, often it's the opposite, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, maybe there's something to be said about, just for your story. Like, if you find something that works, it's like a lot of guys, like right now, it's like, oh my goodness, the ADHD plague of the century. And the ADHD guys are always on my back, like, I have ADHD and you just don't get it. I've been diagnosed with ADHD in the Army
Yeah, it shows, dude.
by a psychiatrist. They gave me all the Adderall. They gave me all the Ritalin. 100%. If you just exercise, fix your diet, and sleep right, and don't dink around on your phone and video games all day, you can totally control it. ADHD. Like, I think it's like a spectrum. It's like it's not some disease that you have, and that's what they want to do is to take away your. I'm afflicted with this. It's not something I can control. Well, even if you did have ADHD and you really did ascribe to what psychiatrists say about it, like if you think your solution is taking amphetamines for the rest of your life, like that's a good solution for you, then you're an idiot. Like that's clearly a band-aid that is all American medicine is, hey, let's just patch the symptom. Let's never get down to the root cause. The root cause is you got a messed up gut. The root cause is you got brain fog and stuff. The root cause is you got like toxins and everything that goes on in our food, like we talked about before. But it's just so amazing. Like if you just shut up and just show up and just do something that works, you'll get what you want pretty quick. And everyone wants, like you said, they want the fruit. Like my buddies, they come to me and you've met them. They come out and they work for like 2 months, and they're like, "Where's my house? Where's my car?" It's like you actually had to do this for like 12 months, and then you have to tell the government you made money. How many guys do I know the end of that 12 months come and they're like, "I didn't make any money." I'm like, "Well, don't be surprised when you can't buy a house in 2 years." It's like things that are worth building, they take some time to build, and they're a big part of that is discipline and consistency and finding a vehicle and then like getting into a place where you just work. Like I've never seen you complain about going to appointments. Like you're just out here and you just work. You're like, it's just what I do is I work all day, take all appointments I can, I do what I can, and like that's like what is it about today's society that people are expecting results so quickly, and they even if they find something that's working for them, it might take 2 or 3 years for them to become great at it. You said you made $240,000 your first year. 2 or 3 years, you're probably making $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's the system. That's how it goes. But they'll have their first year where they make 100 grand and they're like, I'm bored. And it's like, well, I guess you didn't really want money. Like you wanted entertainment or something. Like you're looking to be comfortable, not like actually grow.
There's a lot of hard truth that Tom, I see you speaking to a lot of people that would make you unpopular with a few personalities. But I would always say this one thing that I think is every once in a while, and this is my judgy side, but like I've seen some guys that have come into just, for example, Sunrun. I'm friends with them on Facebook, and they'll post like, hey, I just bought my such and such $200,000 car. And I'm like, dude, you've been making money for 3 years and you are already doing that. Like, I'm still telling my wife, hey, just wait a little bit longer and we're going to have a real nice setup. Like, we don't have a luxurious lifestyle. We've had a thrifty, forward looking. We do plan on indulging, but it's delayed gratification, right? And that's the thing is like my net worth wouldn't be what it is if I wasn't intentionally spending money the way that I've been doing, because I haven't made a ton of money. In fact, I still haven't made over $1 million. I've made 950 twice, and I'm not happy about it. But I mean, if you count my, earnings from like selling other things that aren't solar, then yes, I have. But I haven't been able to breach that, that part. But I think that's part of, man, being a human's hard, and people have feelings. They start making money and they want to show. There's a guy we hired in Texas, and he, his first year, he went to a game and he was there with his wife, and he like couldn't help but tell the people that were his friends that he just made $750K. And it's just human nature. People just want to talk about what they've made, and I actually feel like I have a different motive. I feel like there's no reason. It's kind of like I'm Jesus. They said in the New Testament, like Jesus was like, there was nothing, what was it, becoming about him from the exterior to think that he was significant. And so I've used that story to tell people like, hey, I am just a plain Jane type guy, but I've done these things. And so it's to kind of get their ear so that they might consider like some things that I have to say. But, there is just, people just don't know how to spend their money. It's just what it boils down to. So.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of a multiplicity of things. It's like you could have the consistency maybe, and you could have a skill set, and maybe you have the drive, and you just don't ever spend your money right. Like I've met a lot of guys that are doing this. They're 37 and they're absolutely flat broke.
Yeah,
and they make
a lot of those.
They make $200,000 a year, but they just spend all their money. Like you said, they kind of want their cake before you eat it, and that's what happens. Either you find out how to live off $100,000, and now you have $100,000 to start building that wealth, or you spend $200,000 and you just got to go repeat, and getting to that point where your money's working for you is that point where you can really, like, you start to navigate the world in a way where you're a creator. You're like, I can have what I envision because I can make it possible. Like, I want to create a home in Park City. I want to have this portfolio. It's like, and that's for me, that's really, really exciting. I want to get to that point. I think it has a lot to do with stewardship.
Yeah.
Like, it starts small with, hey, can you be a good steward of, here, God will try. He's like, here's $25,000. Do you go spend it on hookers and strippers and cocaine and gamble it away? Or are you like, okay.
Gotta be really wise with that. Like no more than a 2% allocation.
Yeah, I wish I could laugh harder, but I'm trying to back off my cough. I wanted to do this podcast last week, but I'm still a little bit scratchy.
Yeah, sure.
But when you take that, and it might just be $1,000 the first time, but when God sees you take it and you're like, okay, my family needs a house, we need an office, we need insurance, and like you allocate that money effectively, he's like, oh. And that's the universe. The universe is actually incredibly abundant. Like God doesn't have a limit of money or wealth or whatever you want. But there is a real limitation of sons and daughters and stewards that he can trust. You know, and that's the parable of what was it, the husbandman?
I don't know.
Oh God,
I don't know what it's
well,
called.
you can just
I
do
know
the
what you're talking
vineyard
about,
one.
but yeah.
They're like trying to do the vineyard, and they're like, this sucks. Like, let's burn it all down. And he's like, give him a little while longer. And then there's the other one where they're like, hey, why don't we just kill the dude that's in charge of us and take it over?
Mm.
And then the Lord of the Vineyard's like, okay, they killed my boss. Let me send my son. Why don't we just kill the son? You know? And that's, God's eventually going to come and be like, hey, you killed my son. And that's going to be the second coming of Christ. But there's all these stories in the Bible of stewardship, the parable of the talents, the parable of the vineyard, the parable of the husbandman.
It's true.
And where God's saying, I'm looking for, many are called, but few are chosen, someone that can demonstrate that like maybe for me, I could take it with my business. Like I would love to give Mark $100,000 and just know installs are going to get done and this is going to get managed. I would just love to be able to do that. And one of these, there's a good story because it actually has a lot to do with Soulright, right? So Soulright calls and they want to take my head installer. I don't know if Courtney knew it was my head installer, but really it was my head installer, and my whole crew was recruited by him. So they all follow him, which in business is a bad idea. Like you want them to kind of follow you, not just they'll all follow your crew lead and then you have no crew lead.
Yeah.
But they offer him like a $5,000 bonus, and I'm like, okay, I'll match it. And he's like, okay, I'll stay with you. And then the same day his wife gets in a car wreck, so he ends up at a car. What do you call those? Place where you sell cars.
Just an auto lot.
Yeah, he ends up at an auto lot, and he calls me. He's like, hey, the $5,000 check hasn't cashed. They need a $5,000 deposit. I don't have good enough credit. Will you make the deposit, and we'll just count that as the advance or the bonus? I was like, okay. I give him my credit card, puts $5,000 on my credit card, never shows up back at work again, takes the whole crew.
Wow.
And when that check hits, he keeps it as well. So he took my $5,000 advance. He took an extra $5,000, and the $5,000 advance bonus is you stole it from me because you didn't come back.
Yeah.
So he took $10,000 from me. He took my whole crew, and he went. And that's the magical Bright House crew they were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to go finish all Soulright's installs. And I called Courtney. I was like, or texted him. I was like, hey, like, why'd you steal my guy? And he said, like, I've been talking to him for years, so it's okay.
Well, unfortunately, it sounds like he didn't get a good one. But if your integrity is worth only $10,000, it's just short sighted, right?
I was gonna say, it's like he's driving my diesel truck. It's $50,000. He's pulling my trailer. That's $20,000. And every single job has $30,000 of equipment. So for me, I'm like, that was a really nice, really well spent $10,000. I now found out that this guy that's managing millions of dollars of business isn't worth $10,000 of integrity.
Yeah.
And so that for me was just such a good lesson of the value of integrity and the value of finding someone who you got to have guys on your team that they wouldn't sell their integrity for anything. That's why it's desperate. It's risky. You get guys on your team that, and I hate this right now just because a lot of guys didn't get paid with SunPower going out and Soulright, and they're all just desperate for money. And everyone's pitted up against a wall, and you're like, dude, if you can just lie to a customer and this deal's worth $10,000 more to you because you took off a battery, at largely what I see happening with a lot of companies here in town. That's
true. Yeah.
It's like, well, it's like his family against you. He can lie to you and tell you that you need a smaller battery, make an extra $10,000, and now he can make his rent. It's just not a fun time. I hate dealing with reps that are broke because it pushes them. I have to be so much more scrupulous about their work.
Yeah.
So there's something to be said about stewardship. And when they finally do get those checks, how do they manage it? And largely God will just put you in those positions. And if you're prepared and you manage it how he would expect you to, that's when he gives you more. And so if you feel like you are more in tune and following more closely with God and how he would want you to spend that money, then you should tap into that, and he'll see how you spend that $20 million, and he'll give you $100 million. And you don't have to think, do I need $100 million? You need to think, the guys that have $1 billion, are they better stewards than I am? And if the answer is no, then God needs you to do that. If you're down, if you're willing to take it, it's not even, money doesn't even mean what it used to mean. Like being a millionaire used to be crazy growing up. Like that used to be like my life dream. Now it's like no one's going to care unless it's $1 billion. Like really. I mean, 10 million's cool. It's amazing. 100 million's amazing. But I would look at the people even just as simply as in our industry that have $100 million or have $1 billion company, and I'll name Sunrun. That's $1 billion company.
Mm,
I do not think that, like you said, I think there's a lot of stuff I see that the program lacks integrity. You know, for example, they know they're building the systems to like 70% offset, and the homeowners don't. Happens all the time. We see these appointments all the time,
it's
and
true. Yeah.
the leaders absolutely know what's happening, and they kind of just look the other way. It's like, well, it could make sense. Technically, the ROI is equivalent. Not really, because they can sell it at a higher PPW because it's a smaller cost for the solar. Anyways, I digress. If we were doing what Sunrun's doing with more, you can't read this, but integrity and gratitude and just these attributes that are godly attributes, wouldn't God want us to have a bigger slice of that pie? Wouldn't He want us to have a greater stewardship and a greater influence?
Yeah, I mean, you can make an argument for sure, man. I think that it's complicated. I had one thought. It's a, it's a religious thought. I think there's a theme of that here, but it's funny. I was thinking about in the had some thoughts this morning. Actually, it's really, about the Book of Mormon. I started reading it again, and I felt so bad. There's a part where Laman and Lemuel are talking, and they're like, if we had gone back, if we were in Jerusalem, we know that the people in Jerusalem were righteous, and we might have been happy. And I never have felt sorry for Laman and Lemuel, but in that moment, it struck me. I had this weird feeling. I was like, I feel that's so sad. Like they still had their lives ahead of them, and they had this, probably victim mentality that we don't have the opportunity to be happy. And, you know, we live in the world that we focus on and our perceptions, right? And they just didn't have the right mindset. Nephi had this amazing mindset. It's, so I kind of tie this into my story because I read the, the famous, I will go and do the things the Lord commandeth, for I know that he provides a way, right? And I read an old general conference talk here recently, and he was like, people don't understand that a way for you might be different than somebody else's way. It might be that Thomas, how do you say Davenport? Is that how you say your last name? Maybe he's supposed to be a billionaire, and that just fits right into the plan. Maybe this other guy does more good for the Lord, and he's impoverished in, Ethiopia or something. Who knows? We know that the scriptures teach that Christ is the way. That's my thing here. But in each of our lives, we each have to follow a way, and it's going to be different. And like my path, I think it's significant because I didn't want anything that has happened to me in life. I didn't want to be a door-to-door salesman. I didn't want to be a salesman. I didn't want to go to Chihuahua, Mexico for my mission. I wanted to go somewhere else. Everything I've done, I wanted it to be something different, and I'm grateful for the path I've taken. It's been. I think if people are honest, you referenced Jacob 5, and where the servant is like, you put this tree in the poorest part of the vineyard, and that's how I felt with my life growing up. My dad, he came from a broken home, and my mom came from a broken home too. And they're both good people, but really flawed. We had a lot of problems, and it wasn't an ideal, especially in the LDS community. It wasn't an ideal upbringing. It just, it wasn't. But it's like the Lord says, "Counsel me not." I knew this was the poorest part of the vineyard, and that's why I've pruned and nurtured it this long while. And I feel like that's what people have to realize for their own lives, that sometimes we're saying like, hey, our expectations are bad. We're like, Laman and Lemuel didn't plan on walking through the freaking wilderness for 8 years, and they didn't plan on building a ship and crossing the ocean, but that was their path. It was Jesus Christ is the way, but for their way was going to be across the world, right? Which is insane. And I think that people have to be prepared to accept that like your discipleship, your marriage, your work life, it's all going to be really messy. It's not going to be the way that you want it to be. And but it will be beautiful. There'll be beauty in that. And that's why Isaiah said God's ways are higher than our ways. And just feel so deeply on that. It's only because of experience, and people, whoever listens to this, or all the people across the world, right? They're going to experience that. And if they have, like you just mentioned here, like gratitude, they have a faith perspective, and they feel after God, they're going to figure that out, and their lives are not going to be the way they want them to be. They're going to go a way that God wants them to. But they're going to realize it was all for the best. They're grateful for the journey, and it was just real good. And that's, for me, that's not even related to what we were talking about, but I just wanted to convey that because I look at my life. That's how I feel about it. I just feel like, dude, I'm just plain Jane Forrest Flesh, and I want to make something good of what I've got. Stewardship, right? And if I figure it out and it's something beautiful, it's because it's like the Lord says in the Book of Mormon several times. He said, retroactively, you'll know it was because of me. You'll know it was because of me, and I think that is so comforting to realize, like, you can kind of turn the wheel over to the Lord, and you embrace true principles. You try to be a good person. You act with faith, and things are going to eventually work in your favor. And yeah, it'll be you probably have to have patience and long suffering, but you'll get there. And with Laman and Lemuel, they kind of fall into the Adam fell that men might be and men are, that they might have joy, and it's like, joy kind of escaped them. But I think that it's a perfect plan that God has, and it might have joy is not based on circumstance. It's just based on embracing virtue and following God. And and it could be joy in any circumstance that can work out.
That's beautiful. It's a really good way to end, if we were to end. But it's like, one thing I'd bring into that is this unconditional love that you have to have for your maker, and this acceptance that you are just the most infantile, tiny spot of intelligence. And
you're a bag of water, dude, of water and protein. that amazingly has memories and does all these things. It's crazy.
And brain.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if you just have this love and this kind of like sacrificing of yourself, kind of like Abraham sacrificed Isaac, like, not my will, but thine be done.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a lot of what Mosiah 15 is saying when it says, not he's the Father because of the Spirit, he's the Son because of the flesh.
You're going to this complicated scripture I can't understand.
No, I'm going to make it really simple takeaway. Our goal is to become one with the Father and one with Christ. Christ said, become like me so that when I return, you're like me.
Mm-hmm.
Even as I'm as the Father. And it's about the finding the way is not my will, but thy will be done. It's submitting that will of the flesh, the Son, to the Spirit, the Father. And when you're unified with the Father, when you're just a fleshly bag of water protein boy, but you're giving into this Spirit of the Father, that's when you're one with God. And when you're one with God, there's nothing that he can't do. If you can have any sort of belief or any sort of understanding, you can move a mountain. If you have a faith like unto a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, remove ye hence to yonder place. And that's what it is. It's just this belief. If you can really, really sink into that way and know that, just have unconditional love for the Father and know that he loves you and that he knows more than you and he has a better plan for you, which is so funny because everyone will say they know that. Everyone will say that they know that God loves them and has more knowledge and a better plan. But then when God puts them on that road and it's not what they expected, we tend to kick back like, this isn't what I expected. God must not be real. Or you get that despair. You get forlorn. Your faith is shaken. And like you said, in retrospect, it's always clear that that path was not written by you, but it was intended for you. And a lot of it is to, like, why would God try to grow his stuff in a bad patch of land that's crappy? He's like, I
Yeah.
knew it was crappy. I did it on purpose. Well, his goal isn't maybe necessarily the harvest. It's about you and the growth of you and the story and the lessons he's trying to teach you.
Hmm. I had a lot of feelings about reading First Nephi. That I look at Lehi, and dude, it's crazy the lives we live. Like, I'll get on an airplane and go to you know just Costa Rica or wherever I want to go to, but I wonder if Lehi had ever even gone like 30 miles outside of Jerusalem. And I was this last time I read, I was thinking about Nephi. He said that he saw his dad. I mean, he's the one writing it, and he says his dad was pleading with the Lord for the people. And I was like wondering to myself, like, how does he even know that? But this great man that, you know, he reminded me kind of my dad, because my dad has not really been able to travel, but he was rich, right? He had some wealth, and then just a couple chapters later, it's like he's like, and it came to pass that my father dwelled in a tent, and it's just like this great person is found in humble circumstances, and I think that you know it is hard to see. You have to feel after the Lord, because you might have a Job like experience in life, even though you have great faith, and it might be stuff's not working out for you. And I've felt that way, but also I have kind of struggled with like Moroni's take, where he reminds us that God is a God of miracles and we should look for those too. And so it's funny, you could have both, but you know the honestly, man, like the feelings that I had, this is a side topic, but like, Joseph Smith finished this Book of Mormon right when he's like 23, and I was like, where's the guy? If like, because there's the haters on the Book of Mormon, like, where is the dude that that helped him write it? Because like, you'd have to have such like self control if like you have this amazing book, and then like let's say hypothetically like it's all fake and false or whatever, like that guy that was like, I'm just going to keep my hand down and not tell anybody that I'm actually the guy that wrote it. Like I was like, that's really like, there's just so many things that are like very profound. They're just hidden there. But I know where I was going to go with this thought though. Like, we've been dealing with like guys that have lots of emotions in sales, and you go on this Layman and Lemuel theme that they said they were past feeling. And it's funny because like Layman and Lemuel couldn't feel after the Lord with their feelings, right? That we're told to feel after the Lord. But they probably felt a lot of anger. They had like a lot of emotions. And that's a weird thing. It's a weird paradigm in life that, when you're trying to become a human being, you have to have all this wisdom. It's like you're supposed to listen to certain feelings and you're supposed to ignore other feelings. And that ties into the work that we do in sales. Like, it's part of the gospel. We have to get self-mastery over our feelings. We have to decide what feelings are worth entertaining and what feelings are worth throwing away and just totally ignoring. And that, it's funny, like you don't really even learn that. You just learn that by wisdom in the church and the gospel, but that's part of the gospel. Like, when your wife does something you don't like, you just have to decide, like, you have to get real clear on like, well, what feelings are worth entertaining and what's not. And like, how many people right now, they in the work that they decide, oh, solar's not for me. uh is it really though? And like with your wife, like, how many people have decided that their spouse is bad when their spouse is actually a good person? You know what I mean? Like, people have these. They start getting a feeling, and they just run all over. Like Laman and Lemuel had feelings. I don't blame them, but they went straight to like, we know the people in Jerusalem are righteous, and we know our dad is visionary, and they had these feelings, and it was hard. And the sons, it's the everyone. You don't finish where you start, right? Like the sons of Ishmael, they're like, hey, they got pitched this, like, we're going to go to the promised land. It's going to be really good. It's going to be a land of milk and honey. And they get in that's like 5 days later. Then all of a sudden they're like, dude, this is really hard. Like, let's tie Nephi up and be done with this. It's like they were having feelings, and their feelings prevented them from feeling close to the Lord. So it's like, I can't get caught up enough in this, that there's just moderation in all things. Like, you have to like not feel sometimes, and sometimes you have to really feel. Like, I feel profoundly certain things when I ponder the things of eternity. And then it's like, I guess Satan gives me feelings too. And I have to decide, like, well, now it's not the time to pay attention to my feelings. Now it's time to like turn those away. And I just kind of came to that conclusion. I don't know if it resonates with you, but I feel like I haven't really received that coaching. I'm like, I feel like I need a life coach to tell me, like, hey, that, you're kind of emotional right now. You look like an idiot. And, hey, good job. You're emotional right now. And I can tell you're feeling the spirit of the Lord. Like those are two things that are totally like, it's the same skill set, but you gotta know how to use it.
Well, it's been taught, for generations as alchemy. The Freemasons talk about it, but you read about it in a lot of self-help books, but it's transmutation. It's like this is the power of creation that's in us. Greatest power of creation is actual creation. Having children, that's an incredible power that God's given us. But right along that, in powers of creation, we believe that God takes matter and organizes it. And part of us, the reason we have a body and spirit is to see if we can do all things which the Lord has commanded us to do, and learn this lesson of transmutation is take matter and organize it. Well, first you might have to start with emotion and organize it, and more ethereal things, the spirit, and organize it. But if you can take, like, what is more beautiful than if you could take pain and transmute it into art? Or if you could take anger and transmute it into money that helps your family. Like the ability to breathe that in and circulate that energy and take something that maybe Satan gave to you as bad, and you turn into it, and you do exactly what God intended to you. The best example of that is the atonement of Christ. Like he takes the anger and the hatred and the jealousies of the Sanhedrin, and he has his son put to death, and he transmute this absolutely awful act of hatred, and he transmutes it into the most powerful representation of grace and mercy. And that's what God does, and that's what he asks us to do as we strive to be like him is, can you take bad circumstances and make them good? And can you make, in the last days, in every knee shall bow, every tongue shall confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. And everything that Satan thought he was doing to rebel against this plan will actually convert to make it possible. So it's interesting to me how these principles come together. And yes, the church always has taught it through culture and stuff. And then you read about it in like other spheres. And, Joseph Smith was really good at that, kind of being able to discern by the Spirit. Read the Apocrypha. You're going to have to discern by the Spirit what's true and what you can take. But that's one principle I've definitely taken, is this like alchemical transmutation. Really big ones like sexual energy. Lust is a really, really powerful thing that most young men just have no idea how to manage, and it turns into pornography. It turns into just life-destroying, marriage-destroying activities. And I totally feel that, and I have dealt with that, and I see it with my siblings. I see it with friends in school. And this is just, it's such an overwhelming power. This is the power of creation within you. Yeah, and it's true. Really overwhelming unless you really, really have a handle on it, 0 to 30.
It's a heavy stewardship that comes at you pretty quick in life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you can now create something in your 13. You can create a human being that would, if you chose to make such actions, result in them living on earth according to your specifications of how well you can provide for them. And that's going to affect their 80 years, 100 years of life. Like you start to see like how profound our actions are. Life and, sex is the most obvious way that our actions turn into like 100 years of results. But really everything we do, the world is a womb, and we are always seeding thoughts and seeding hatred or love or forgiveness or money or everything we do. Like we don't always see the actions, but it always plays out. And God's trying to teach us like, hey, like I want you to actually organize matter. Let's get just this tiny morsel of energy that I've given you and these emotions, and let's organize that. And if you can do that, then I'll increase your stewardship. So there's multiple stewardships happening on the earth. You got the physical one, you have the financial one, you have the energy one, and you got the emotional one. And it's like a multi-ethereal spirit body, mind body, soul body, physical body, and we're given all these stewardships to learn just a glimpse of God's power that He's given us to see how we do with it.
Yeah. It's good. It's like a tale of two podcasts. We're gonna have to heavily edit it.
What do you mean? Because you go solar to church to Bitcoin.
We got finances. We just covered everything.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that's not interested. Maybe they wouldn't be interested in crypto if it was down right now, because people are sheep.
Yeah.
But just for like swag, I'll mention on the board behind Mark here, we have Forrest and I have been going head to head on whether Doge or MicroStrategy is going to perform better. But in front of our whole team, 20 guys, they had the opportunity.
Yeah.
Forrest wrote down MicroStrategy at 222
But dude,
on 1021.
You're a little short-sighted though, dude. I mean, you got to extrapolate this over like 3 or 4 years. Then it's like a no-brainer.
Sure, but I mean,
dude.
if you were a day trader and you were following Forrest from 1021 to today, that's like less than 20 days, and you've gone up 70%.
Yeah.
I also wrote down Doge at 12 cents, so I got to give myself a little pat on the back there as well. But hopefully, if we get back on the call, like do another podcast in like June or July, MSTR's at $1,000 again, and Dogecoin's over $1.
That would be really good.
And then we'll go to Costa Rica.
Yeah.
Take both our families.
Yeah. I like it.
Okay, well, I'm pretty much done.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Yeah, thank you.